Welcome to What Haunts You, a podcast about the stories that haunt our dreams. I'm Carly.
And I'm Katie. We are discussing the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. It was the first time I saw it, I think, but I might have seen it before. It's hard to tell because it's like one of those infamous movies that like I've definitely heard a lot about. I started watching Leatherface, and I think that's when I had talked to you, and you were like, no, turn that off until you watch the original one. And so I did
Yeah.
see like 15 minutes of Leatherface from 2018.
Yeah.
Before seeing this. And I like kind of just knew who Leatherface was.
Yeah. I don't think that this is the type of movie that you can, even through like cultural osmosis, like actually know as much about as it feels like you do. Like, I think it just like plays very differently than it feels like it's going to. I don't know, especially with the blood, like the lack of blood. But before we even get into like all the details, like what was like, how did you like it? Like, how did you feel about it? Just like initial kind of reaction to it.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought it held my attention the whole time. It was definitely like one of those movies where I was like, "Don't go in there. What are you doing? Turn around." But um
In an old timey Hollywood accent.
yes. Just brought it out of me. I don't know. And yeah, there was just a lot of choices that I was like, why are you doing that? And I actually didn't know that there was a disabled character in it. It was interesting because I listened to the You Are Good episode about Texas Chainsaw Massacre last night, like right after. Actually, I think we had paused the movie because Pat was making me food. And so I started listening to the podcast before I had finished the movie, but it didn't spoil anything.
Chaotic.
Yeah. But this is how I do media. But I only listened to like the first 5 minutes, but I hadn't realized that Franklin and Sally were siblings. Until I listened to that. It had said it like in the text in the beginning that scrolls through, but I just kind of missed that. And I just thought that they were all friends. But I am like kind of a little more upset with Sally for not taking care of Franklin better, knowing that she's his sister.
Yeah.
And in You Are Good, they were talking about how like they made Franklin like an annoying character, and I guess like the actor was acting annoying on set to try to like keep that, but I actually didn't find him that annoying. I guess he was complaining, but all of his complaints seemed like very fair to me.
Yeah. I think that his complaints were fair. I think he just didn't get to say anything else, really. And so it's like all he's doing is complaining. But like also like he's kind of getting dragged a lot. Like I would probably be complaining too.
Yeah, I was really upset when they got to the house and they just left him outside. I was like, what the hell, guys? And then he had like a really hard time getting in the
Yeah, I
house.
was also thinking about just like how much worse that would have been back in the day without like a smartphone. Like not that it would be okay now to do that to someone, but like
Right.
it just seems like actual psychological torture to like do that to somebody and like they have nothing. He didn't even have a book. Like he was just there.
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah, I think one of the first scenes is they're stopping on the side of the road so he can go to the bathroom, and they like bring him. They have a ramp in their van. They take him down, and then they bring him like over to the side of the road and give him like a can to pee in. And then he like they must have not locked his chair, and because he like slips off the side of the road, and he and his chair like tumble down. That was, I had never heard of that scene before. I actually didn't know there was a disabled character in the movie until I started it. And that was like really shocking to me. And I thought that they actually did like a reasonably good portrayal of a disabled character for the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think they made him like a little insufferable, but they were all kind of a little insufferable. He was just the most explicitly insufferable. Um, and I do think like on some level it was like very real that like he would just get left somewhere. Like not that's not cool, but like I do imagine that like that probably would have been what people would have done in that moment.
Yeah. And I like that we see like real moments of him struggling. Not that I like seeing him struggle, but just that like I've seen other representations where you aren't along for the journey of what the disabled person is going through. You're just like seeing the people who are watching them. And I thought that was good that we saw how inaccessible the world is, and especially then. But so they pick up a hitchhiker. Is the hitchhiker before or after the gas station? Before, right?
I don't honestly don't remember. I think before, but I don't remember.
I wrote it down. I haven't looked at my notes at all yet. Yeah, so I've been trying to write notes scene by scene. So I had thought that I watched a lot of videos and there is like conflicting feedback on if it is based on a true story or not. Some people seem to think it's like loosely based on Ed Gein.
I think it is to the extent that like half of horror movies from before the 80s are like loosely based on Ed Gein. Like, you know what I mean? I think that was just like one of the scariest things people could think of in that like time.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but I think it's like so far off that it's like to say it's like based on a true story seems like very much like a stretch. I don't know.
Right. I was thinking that part of why people think it's based on true story is just from the way it starts, where it has like the scrolling
Mm-hmm.
words. It feels kind of like a report, and then it immediately goes to they're like listening to the news of something. So I think it
Yeah.
feels more realistic. It's also weird for me watching it because I heard that this like created the formula for slashers basically. But like I see the formula that I've seen in a bunch of other ones and it's hard for me to be like, "Oh yeah, this one came first" because I hadn't seen it first.
Yeah, it's funny because it follows the formula but like also feels really different than like the rest of the slasher movies do in a way. And I think part of that is because there is this like explicit like trespass element of like these people, like the kids, teens, young adults, whatever, just like walk into this home. You know what I mean? Like I think that like does make it
I was
feel,
so offended.
yeah, that makes it feel fundamentally different to me because like everybody else is getting like hunted down in places where they have no reason to like think that something bad would happen to them. Whereas this is like if you walk into somebody's house, you don't know who the fuck is in there. And like you don't know what they're gonna think of you because if someone walks into my house, I'm assuming they're a threat. Like you know, I don't know that
Right.
I would do the same things that the Sawyer family does. But I do think I would my immediate reaction would be like this is a threat. I'm in danger. I gotta get away or something.
Right. Like so the first person who goes into the house is Kirk, right?
Yes.
I had a little bit of a hard time following their names, but I think I know all of them now, but it took me till the end.
Oh, I could be. I think yeah, because Jerry is the sister's boyfriend.
Right. And
Yeah.
she's like, Jerry, Jerry, when they're all going through
Yeah.
the woods. Um,
Yeah.
there were so many times where I was like, can you just not yell right now? Like it would probably be better for you if you weren't yelling. um, but it's a movie, so they have to do the inciting thing. Um, but
Yeah.
uh with Kirk, he was like going up to the door and he's like, hey, anybody home? And they go there because they're looking for gas and he hears a generator on. So he's like, ooh, they must have something. And they have a shit ton of cars. He starts looking in the house. It just kept making me think of like, this is how I ended up with my little dog who I found on the street because the dog led me back to his house and there was like music playing inside. So I was like, okay, somebody's probably home. I was like knocking on the door for a while and like calling and nobody came. And I was like, this is how people get murdered. I'm leaving. I'm editing and it really sounds like I kidnapped my dog, but I did not. I wrote a little note and left it on the car there. I didn't hear back for a week, but then the owner's daughter called me and her dad was struggling with some health issues at the time and wasn't really able to take care of the dog. So it worked out for both of us for me to keep him. And he was 12. I had him for 2 years. He was a very sweet, tiny little teacup boy. I thought he was a guinea pig when he was running in the grass. He was only 3.5 pounds. Now back to whatever else I was saying. I wouldn't go inside a house. And that was like a pretty normal looking house. This house has like bones and shit on the walls, things hanging. But I guess maybe if you're in a farming area, that seems more normal.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like a big kind of piece of what the movie is, right? Like it's about like some tension between like the urban and the rural.
Yeah.
And the kind of way that not only do these kids think that there are no rules when they like enter a rural area? Because like you have to think there's no rules to just walk into someone's house, and you wouldn't do that in a city. Like you would, they would know not to do that in a city, so they're kind of putting the rules aside of just like basic decency and respect, right? And like just kind of feeling entitled, right? Like isn't it like kind of an entitlement to walk into someone's house?
Yeah, it's definitely entitlement, but I'm not sure that that guy wouldn't have walked into somebody's house in the city either if it was a similar situation where they were like looking for something and the door was unlocked. But I think that they definitely felt very entitled even when they were just like walking up their backyard, especially in Texas. I was like, you're about to get shot. Like, you're just gonna walk up into somebody's yard and they're gonna be there and be like, no. But I do think it's interesting to look at Leatherface from the perspective of that he's just protecting his house because he didn't really go after them until Sally. But I know when I think her name's Pam, I thought her name was Beth at one point for some reason. Is there even a person named Beth? I was writing like Beth slash Pam
There's only like 5 people.
in my notes. Yeah, I don't know where I got that from. So Pam goes into the house. She falls into the feathers, and then we see this room where they have this seems like the most Ed Gein inspired part where there's this whole room of art and furniture made out of body parts.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, I forgot to say actually the first time that I saw Leatherface, I thought that the mask and the hair looked a lot like Michael Myers' mask. And I was like, wait, is Michael Myers' mask inspired by Leatherface?
I don't think so. Not really. I don't know. But I think well, he also has like several like faces.
Yeah, he has a few. It was specifically the first one that I thought looked like
Do
that
you mean from this movie or from when you saw Leatherface?
from this movie.
Okay. I'm just making sure.
Like when he gets Kirk.
Yeah. Yeah, like the plain one cuz it doesn't, well, because it's like really pale, right? Like it doesn't have the makeup on it and stuff. So I think I kind of could understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about it, but I like I'm picturing it in my head though, and it's like just like a very pale face with like a tuft of hair. So.
Right, yeah.
But going off of what you were saying about him protecting his house, I do think that, and I think this is also what makes it different from like other slasher movies, is when you see any of the other slashers, they're like standing there, like posturing. They're usually like standing really big and like breathing hard and like being very intense. And when we see Leatherface outside of while he's actively killing someone, he just looks like flustered as all hell. He's like just frantically trying to manage whatever the fuck is going on. We like see him sitting down by the window and taking a fucking moment and like looking like he's about to have a breakdown, but then kind of regulating and kind of getting his shit together.
Yeah, I like that scene a lot.
Yeah, he just looks so like exasperated. Like he's just like sitting there, like and he like has his head, like hands on his face in 1 minute, and he's just like, "What the fuck is going on here?"
Right, I think that was after Pam. I almost called her Beth again. But Pam like tries to leave the house and he snatches her, but I think she was already in the house, so he's still like, but that's when he goes to the window. He looks like, oh man, I not so much like what did
Right.
I just do, but more like, oh, that was tiring.
It's like that was tiring, but also like, what the fuck? Why are these people coming in? Like he just looks like, I don't know. Like he looks like overwhelmed almost. Like he looks like how I look when
Yeah.
I've like been cleaning all day and I've just like spit. Like he looks the way I looked when the cabinet thing fell off my fridge door, and there was like sauce all over the ground, and I like thought I was gonna have a nervous breakdown. He looks like that. Like, you know what I mean? He
Yeah.
looks like my day is just going so wrong right now. Like that's like the way that scene reads to me.
Yeah, we also see a close up of his teeth at that time. I mean, it's not like right on his teeth, but it's a close up of his face, and it seemed like they really wanted us to recognize the teeth. And
Right.
they're pretty, I mean, they look like pretty obviously like fake teeth to me now, but they're like, he doesn't have as many teeth as one traditionally does, and they're in like a bunch of different arrangements. And I was watching videos about this, and I saw that in Leatherface he gets shot in the face, which I assume is like part of his mask wearing. If we assume that that is what actually happened there, but I was wondering if that was part of his teeth stuff too. I think that it was like when they were making the movie that the teeth were just like associated with being poor and rural.
Right. Right, I think so too. And I think in the You Are Good episode about this, they were also talking about, do we think Leatherface has ever left this like immediate vicinity? And I actually don't know if I haven't seen, I'm trying to remember if I've seen Leatherface the movie or not. I feel like I have, but I like don't really remember it. I haven't enjoyed most of the rest of the franchise, so I don't know. But I do think that was an interesting question of, does he even exist in the world, and like would he have ever gone to a doctor or a dentist, even if they could afford it? Like would he have gone, or is he just kind of confined to the house in the way that like somebody who probably has like disabilities would maybe have been confined to their house, like back in the day, especially like somewhere where they probably didn't have access to any services.
Yeah. The end actually surprised me a lot seeing it for the first time. I was not expecting it, and I thought that this was like a good way that they looped things around. And I mean, there's so much stuff about economic differences, especially between rural and city stuff here too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's also like in areas like that specifically, and this is the situation for the hitchhiker, like people are kind of being like made obsolete by like increased technology in
Yeah.
farming. And like that was what the situation with the hitchhiker was, right? He says that he used to be like the killer at the slaughterhouse, and he like got put out of business basically by the air gun thing. It's hard to tell kind of like when did it start to be this way, but it seems like a lot of it has to do with the changing the meat industry and stuff, but it's not clear exactly what the timeline is for everything.
I
Hmm.
mean, the grandpa seems to have been a big part of starting their life going this way, where he would have.
Right.
I also thought it was really interesting. I found out that the grandpa was played by an 18-year-old. They just did
Isn't
it
that
with
funny?
makeup. Yeah, they did a really good job. And when we first see the grandpa, we see him in a chair, like opposite the grandma. When Sally first runs in, is like, "Help me, help me!" Um, and I assumed he was dead.
Yeah, he looks dead.
Right. He he looks very similar to the corpses that we see in the beginning that look kind of like lardy on their faces.
Hmm.
I think one of the things that I appreciate the most about this movie, because we find out that there's been grave robbing. I feel like there were no loose ends. Like everything was covered, which
Hmm.
that I don't know, that even when things are unsettling, that makes me feel more resolved. Be like, oh, okay. At the end of it was just very self-contained.
Yeah, I think it's funny that we're doing this one right after we recorded Smile, because it's just so opposite of that. Like, it's a short movie that makes perfect use of its time. Everything is very clean and like straightforward. I mean, it's not clean, but you know what I mean by that. It just does what it's trying to do, and it does it right, and it makes sure that like everything makes sense and lands together well. And it's like a nearly perfect movie. I don't even know, if gun to my head, like what would I change to make this movie better? Like I don't know that there is anything.
Yeah, especially knowing their budget was like in today's money was around $800,000. It was 140,000 at the time, but that's not much. And like you were saying, there's not much blood. A lot of that was because they were budgeting for it.
Right. Well, and that's a big contrast from Smile too. When I was like, when we were talking about how the one scene kind of went on too long and was like too graphic, I think what this movie does really well is recognize that like if we make this on screen, it's not going to work that well. But if we let people just picture it and like see how people are reacting, like the meat hook scene,
Right.
and you just see her face. You don't really see anything, right? You see her face as she gets like lowered onto this meat hook. And her like face acting and her scream is so good. It's so good. It makes you feel you have just like seen the most visceral, terrible thing, and you didn't see anything really.
Yeah, I was surprised when she was still alive in the freezer, but I think that that is more like how like they're saving her for meat. But so I want to go back to the hitchhiker things. They
Okay.
pick up the hitchhiker. One of the girls, I think it's Pam, is like talking. Hold on, I just need to lay out the characters because they're all still mixed up in my head. So there's Pam, who loves astrology and is dating Kirk, who seems just kind of like a jock
Mm-hmm.
man. And
Yeah.
then there's Sally, who's Franklin's sister, and her nipples are hard the entire movie. And then there's Jerry, which was like the most sexualized thing about the movie was Sally's nipples. They like don't really.
And I hesitate to call that sexualized because, like, who cares? Like, it's a nipple. I don't
I
know.
don't know. The way that they were showing it felt very sexualized to me. I mean, they also were shooting. Somebody was like, point the camera directly at Pam's butt and her tiny shorts. There was some sexualized stuff about their clothes, but the way it began, it seemed like it was going to evolve into being much more sexualized and like sexual violence stuff I was expecting, and there just wasn't any of that.
Yeah, there's nothing sexy about what this family is doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing sexy about any of it. It's just like straight up, like, we need your meat.
Yeah. And they oh yeah, and then so Sally's boyfriend Jerry, and then Franklin. I've placed them all in the van now. I see them in my head.
Yes, I can too.
And and then so they pick up this hitchhiker, which, like, I feel like there was a lot more hitchhiking at that time, but then like people started actually getting murdered from hitchhikers and weird stuff like that. So then it became like, I don't know if it was illegal at that point, but hitchhiking is illegal in most states now, I think.
No, it's not. I think maybe my mom told me that to keep me from hitchhiking, but it's legal in most states. There's only a few that it's not.
But so they pick up this man. He's like tall, lanky. He has like this weird fur purse thing with him that just looks like a bunch of animals like sewn together, kind of. That's like our first uh, body parts thing. Well, I guess we see the corpses, but that's like,
Yeah.
this is more artistic. I think the corpses were meant to be artistic too. They kind of say that, but people will turn anything into art, I guess, if with limited resources. And so it's like one of the first things I noticed was like he had a very large birthmark on his face. It seemed like he and Franklin kind of like immediately bonded at first, and they were like sort of getting along. And I thought that they had like a sweet connection at first. And they start having like a really weird conversation, though, which I think Franklin had brought up before the hitchhiker was even there, where he's like talking about whether it's more humane to sledgehammer cows to death, which, like, I didn't know that that was a thing ever, and is like really horrifying and also makes sense.
Yeah.
And then now they're using like an air gun thing, and the hitchhiker, I don't know if we ever learn his name, but he ends up being the older brother of Leatherface, and he invites them back to dinner, which is, I don't know, it seems weird. He's like, they're talking about head cheese, which like I had never heard of before and sounds really gross. And he takes out from his little fur purse, he's like, oh yeah, I've got pictures of dead animals. Do you want to see them? We're talking about dead cows. It seems like he does want to have some kind of social connection and just like doesn't know anything to talk about except for killing animals and like showing how good his family was at it.
Yeah. And something interesting that happens that I guess this would be like maybe, or I don't know, this might be, we might have to come back to this because this is like a big conversation. But while they're talking about all of this, like Sally at one point says, I like meat. Let's change the subject.
Oh, I wrote that line down too because one person is talking about like, oh, meat is gross, and then she's like, I like meat.
But she's like, I don't want to hear about like the visceral element of it.
Right. I don't want to think about how it gets there.
Right. And I think that that's like one of the kind of key things of the movie is like, especially given like, right, they like, this is a family that's like worked at the slaughterhouses forever. This specific hitchhiker, right, like lost his job because of the way things have changed. And it's like the increasing like depersonalization of farming and like the meat industry, because, you know, initially, and like this is going way back, obviously, a farm is like one guy and like maybe some like farm hands, and like he knows his animals on a personal level. He is doing all of the things himself, right? He's doing the slaughtering, but he's also doing the birth, the rearing of the animals, right? Like raising them, taking care of, like he's seeing it through from start to finish. And then like,
yeah,
obviously one thing changes at a time, like into like this domino effect to like factory farming where there's like no personalization to it. And I think like that lets everyone like do what Sally does here, right? And say like, I don't want to think about this. Like I don't want to think about the fact that like my meat is meat.
I've definitely heard more than a handful of people say that watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre is part of what made them become vegetarians.
Toby Hooper stopped eating meat while they were making this movie. I don't know if he like
Oh,
stuck with
really?
it, but while they were making the movie, he stopped eating meat. Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that. And that's the director.
Yeah.
I also didn't know that he and like most of the people who were involved in making the film were under 25.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they did a really good job.
They did. They did an amazing. I mean, they did an amazing job.
Yeah. I forget what triggers the hitchhiker to like lash out, and then they kick him out of the van. Because they had been having like a pretty good time, and then I know he ends up like cutting himself and cutting Franklin, but I thought that that was after something else happens.
He takes a picture of Franklin, and then Franklin's like, "Oh, it didn't turn out very good." And he goes, "It's a good picture. Like that's $2. You can pay me
Oh
now."
yeah,
And Franklin's like, "What? I didn't do that. I didn't agree to that
right.
deal, sir." And so he says no, and then obviously and I think that's when the hitchhiker cuts Franklin.
Okay, yeah. And Franklin seems to have lost his knife at this point, also, because later he's looking for it, and I think Sally got it back, but then she doesn't know where it is. Um, but the hitchhiker leaves and like smears blood on their van, and I kind of thought of that as like a marking, like that was when like, okay, like you guys are gonna die now.
Yeah, and Franklin is the only one who seems to think that like matters. When they get out of the car, he's the only one who's like
Right.
that guy like marked our van. Like, is this okay?
I also think it's really interesting. Like I think I texted you when I was watching this, and they like go to the gas station. I mean, like first of all, gas station without gas is a little weird, but I mean they seem to just be struggling. But like the guy's like, oh yeah, don't go there. You should stay here. And I was thinking at the time, like, oh yeah, they should stay there. They'll be safe if they're there. But then, like, finding out at the end of the movie that, like, they wouldn't have even been safe if they stayed there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's why, like, okay, obviously this is like a movie, but like that's why in a roundabout way I feel bad for Leatherface, because like this I think is not Leatherface's job. Like I think his job is like the butchering and the cooking and like the house stuff,
Yeah.
you know? And I think it's everybody else's job to kill these people. And so I think like that's why Leatherface looks so like exasperated and like so flustered and like panicked by the whole situation, because he's like, this isn't my part. Like these people are supposed to be taken care of at the gas station, and then they bring them to me and I deal with them. Like I don't know, I'm not sure, but like that's kind of how I read it, of like he stays at the house. Nobody else is at the house with him while this is happening because they're out in theory facilitating this plan. Maybe. It's hard to it's never really confirmed, you know what I mean? You never like really find out like how they expected it to go, but it seems like this is not how they expected it to go.
I guess the space that he's in, that Leatherface is in, does look like a butchering area, and maybe he doesn't get, but he definitely seems. I had assumed that he was regularly taking part in killing, but maybe it's, I mean, I think this is like kind of the comparison with killing animals again, too. Like, if, like, the butcher, maybe the animal's not dead yet, but they're unconscious, and maybe, like, I think maybe that's what happens with the humans. Because the guy at the gas station is very much like, this isn't my job. I don't kill people. I just cook them and sell them. And, like, that's, which I think is, like, a lot of people like who work at grocery stores where
Mm-hmm.
or like a deli, they're like, oh well, I'm not the one who's killing the animals. It's easier to like separate from that
Yeah.
than if you are like actually personally involved in that part.
Yeah.
And I think like how we think of humans as being different from animals, and being, I think like for a long time in history, humans thought of like other humans as having souls and animals as not having souls or something like that. But it's
Well, and humans have not always considered all other humans to even be humans.
right.
That's also relevant, right? Like
Yeah.
for a long time, like, you know, white people would think of everybody else as like not really being fully human
Yeah.
as well. So there's always been this like desire for hierarchy that exists in a way that is gross.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I eat meat. Both my parents were vegetarians when I was born and little, and then my dad became a pescatarian, and my mom just started eating meat. And I have tried being a vegetarian and a vegan at various points in my life, but I've had a really hard time doing it without becoming severely anemic. But I've always had like, uh, I have like a lot of weird food stuff and texture stuff, and I've always had like weird texture stuff with meat where like sometimes I'm just like, no, don't want that. It feels too meaty. And I also went to a dairy farm on vacation for like most summers of my childhood, and I would feed the baby cows, and they kept all of the female cows for dairy, but the male cows would usually go to somewhere to be turned into meat. And like every time I went there, I would be like, I can't eat a hamburger. I would I would develop like really personal relationships with the cows, and I would think like I don't want to eat that cow specifically, so I would not eat beef for like however long afterwards, but it still felt disconnected to me between like eating another cow and that cow. And now it's more, I don't know, a lot of it is texture stuff, but I also like don't want to eat animals really. And I've been mostly not eating meat at home and then eating meat when I go out. Um but it's is a weird thing, and I think like the more that I find ways to replace meat, and like meat replacements now are like there's just so many more options than there were like in the 70s or even like when I was a kid. I know you've been like thinking about how you consume meat also.
Yeah. So I also eat meat. Am I have a lot of weird food things. I don't need to whatever. I have a lot of weird food things. But I have been thinking about like my meat consumption for a long time. When I was really young, like I think I must have been like 12 or so. I tried to be vegetarian, and my pediatrician was like, "Nope, like we're not doing this. You don't eat enough of anything to for this to." I basically just wanted to eat bread, like which is like not like that's not good for anybody. So like that's, whatever. And I was just like not able to like eat other things. And so
Not that bread's not good, but it needs to be part of a
yeah,
full.
you can't eat one food forever. Like as much as I would personally
Right.
love to. Like you can't. Um and so I stopped obviously being a vegetarian because that was like not going to be conducive to me living and growing as a child. But I
Hmm.
yeah, I'm wanting, and Katie and I we like have talked about this. I'm wanting to like try some different meat replacements and like different protein options and figure out like to like at least start trying to cut back. I think that I this is something that's always like I think about a lot, and I try not to have as much as this like hurts my like heart and brain a little bit. Like I try not to like ignore the fact that my meat is meat. I try to like think about it a little bit while I'm like eating, which I think is weird. And like, I think people think I'm weird for doing that when I bring this up because obviously it like doesn't feel that good. But I also like don't think that it's fair for me to like not think about it. I think that like the way that our like society kind of runs like really emphasizes that like separation. And I don't think that's like healthy, even though like cognitive dissonance doesn't always feel good. Like I think it's kind of important that I feel that a little bit. Also because I would like to like try to do my best to like cut down at the very least. I would love to stop eating meat. I don't know if that's in the cards for me, but I do want to like really reduce it. And so I'm just trying to be thinking about that. But I also, so this has been in my brain for a long time. And then several months ago, I read Tender is the Flesh, that book, which I think everybody should have to read. Like, frankly, I think everybody who eats meat should have to read that book. And I say that as someone who eats meat. And it kind of like flooded me a little bit about like this topic. And so I have been thinking about it
What is
like,
that book about? I can assume based on what you're talking about, but like, can you summarize it a little?
yeah, so that book is essentially about a world like seemingly not too far into the future where animals have been wiped out by some like infectious disease or whatever,
Mm.
and they can't like get meat from animals anymore, and so they start to like need to get meat from
Oh,
people.
wow.
And so there are like factory farms full of human beings,
Mm.
and the main character is like an overseer at one of these like factory farms, and is gifted as like kind of a bonus at work a person
Oh, my God.
to like raise and eventually slaughter.
Ugh.
And I won't like get into the whole story in case like whatever, like spoilers and whatnot, but like that's the premise of it, and it like plays out in ways that are all over the place emotionally, in the ways that I think are feel real on some level, even though like the scenario was not exactly real. But it was a hard book to read.
Yeah. I
It was a hard book. Yeah, it was a hard book to read. And because this is something that's always been floating around in my head, I felt like really flooded by it. And I was talking to like I was talking to somebody that I know who is vegan a little bit about the book, who has also read the book, and just kind of like my reflections on it and stuff. But I think that should be like required reading, because I just don't think we should be allowed to like pretend that meat isn't meat if we're going to eat it. And I think like that's part of the decision. It's like informed consent, right? Is like really thinking about like, am I okay with this process? How can I divest from it in the ways that like feel doable to me?
When I think of chickens, it's hard for me to think of like, I don't think of a chicken the way that I think of my dog, but I would never eat dog. And I think, especially in the US, a lot of people who eat meat think that way about the way that different animals are different.
And those people have obviously never seen a cow in person. I'm just going to say that. Like, you can't see a cow and not be like amazed by how cute they are and how sweet they are. Like, they're so precious. Like, I just want to say that.
Yeah, I mean, cows are much more like dogs to me than chickens
Yeah.
are. I know people who love their chickens, who have like pet chickens that they're like very affectionate with. Um, I don't feel affection towards chickens, but I still don't want to. I don't really want to be responsible for the death of any other living thing, and I know that I currently am.
Yeah.
I also feel like when I think about humans eating humans, I think it's interesting that we kind of talked about, not on here, but like just personally, we've talked about the Andes Mountain crash and like those people who had to resort to cannibalism to stay alive, and like the
Mm-hmm.
what's the show? I can't think of the name. Yellow Jackets. Um, and I think like the yellow jacket situation is like a lot harsher, but I definitely feel differently about cannibalism to survive. And there's just like something here with like, I mean, that's kind of the thing with animal meat
Yeah.
consumption also, is like when it's for survival, which a lot of times it is. But I definitely don't think that we should be factory farming, and the way that animals have become industrialized is really
Yeah, I'm
sickening.
undecided if I actually think it's wrong to eat meat, or if I just think that it's wrong to eat meat in the system that we currently have. Like, I honestly am not. I'm like always trying to figure out where I land on that, and I honestly don't know. There is another movie that I've seen that like talks about this too. That talks about it. I mean, I don't think it's as good of a movie as this, but it's just more explicit. Called The Farm, where it's like people kidnapped and taken onto a farm, and it's like exactly what you would expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that it's like a great movie, but I think it is a movie that like makes you go, "Huh, okay." Like some stuff to turn over in the noggin there.
I've always kind of felt like, and I know like when I became vegetarian before, I was saying like, I feel like if I couldn't personally kill an animal, that I shouldn't eat meat. And I don't think I personally could kill an animal, but that also isn't the way that societies have run, even like before factory farming. Like there would usually be one person who is responsible for that part, and that's something that they kind of do in Yellow Jackets too, where it's like one person's role to do that, and the rest of the people are doing other things. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. I I feel conflicted about it also, but I definitely do feel like I have some cognitive dissonance in my meat eating, and that I would have trouble eating it if it was more confronting. But I do the thing that you're talking about, like where as I'm eating it, I'll be thinking about that it's an animal, but my brain's still like, it can't fully accept it or think about it, really. But
Yeah.
I love a lot of meat alternatives, and like some of my favorite foods are those things. I imagine it's like a lot more difficult to stop if it's not already easy for you.
Yeah, and I think one of my things, and I have this issue because of not just with meat substitutions, but anything where I'm trying to kind of diversify my food intake, is that like I have at many times in life wasted a lot of money and wasted a lot of food trying to like something,
Yeah.
and like I can't eat it. Like if I don't like it, I literally cannot get my body to like get it down. Like I'll just be doing that thing where you're chewing and chewing and chewing and you can't swallow, which is even worse because I don't like the food that's in my mouth.
I feel that way also.
Yeah, so I need like, and we've talked about this actually. Like I need the kind of support of some other people to put me in situations where I can like taste it.
Yeah, I definitely want to make you tofu in a bunch of different ways and see what you I just don't believe that you could entirely not like tofu. I know that that's been your experience so far. I'm not saying I don't believe your experience, but I feel like there is a
I
kind.
agree with you. The only hesitation I have is that the first time I saw something that was made with tofu that I thought I might like, I sent it to you and you were like, that looks terrible.
Yeah, I forget exactly what it was, but I was like, "Wait, what? I love tofu, and that is not what I would want to eat." But I
Because
think
I think that you want to eat tofu that tastes like tofu, and I want to eat tofu that tastes like it's not tofu. Like
maybe,
that's kind of I think a fundamental difference because you like tofu. Like I need it to be like, because even if I like tofu crumbled and seasoned to taste like meat, that's not really liking tofu. That's like being able to eat tofu, which is good enough. But
yeah,
like you don't like if you need it to taste not like tofu, you don't actually like tofu. You like tofu. Like
right.
actually, it seems like.
Yeah. Have you ever had a veggie burger that you liked? Like if you like did it up all with the seasonings and stuff that you like?
I did have a Beyond Burger once. I like was very curious, and I took it upon myself to buy and make myself a Beyond Burger. It was fine. I don't eat a lot of hamburgers. I think that like if I ate hamburgers, I would fully switch to Beyond Burgers. Like I think I could do that. I mean, I'm sure I would still get something when I was like out to eat at this point because it's hard for me to find things I like sometimes when I'm going out. But I am curious. Something I want to try in the near future. Maybe you can come over for dinner one day. I want to try to make like my meat sauce with Beyond Meat
Oh yeah.
and see how that turns out, because that seems like a way that wouldn't be as like no like that seems like it would be like feel more subtle because it's like not the only thing going on. So I want to try that soon.
Trader Joe's has a vegan bolognese that's actually
But
really
I make
good.
really good sauce. Like I like really make good sauce. I'm making some tomorrow actually. So I want to try
Okay.
to yeah, so I want to try to make it how I like it, but with Beyond Beef or like whatever brand. I don't I Beyond is just the one that I've tried. But I want to try to do that
Yeah.
with like a beef substitute. Um yeah, I do yeah. So this is like something that I've actually been thinking about is that I'm going to start doing is like I'm going to make a list of dishes I would like to try, um, that are either using a meat substitute or just like have protein in it that I would like, um, and start
Yeah.
kind of chipping away at that a little bit because I do want to, at the very least, eat less meat. I would love if like I could reach a point where it felt like actually doable for me to eat no meat. I don't know if that'll happen, but I think it's kind of like whatever that line from the Talmud is that's like you don't have to complete the work, but you can't ignore the work either, or whatever it is. Like it's like
Yeah, from Pure Vote.
yeah, like that's
Yeah.
kind of how I view it for myself at least. I think that like if people cannot eat meat, like and I think it's a great choice to do to make to not.
Right. And I think like it makes a big difference still if people eat less meat. Like I know a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
are kind of black and white on this, and like I've been trying to it would be hard for me to totally eliminate meat, but I've eaten meat like 3 times in the last couple of weeks, and I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially because that could make a big difference in the way that animals are treated if we don't need if like if we just needed less
Right.
of them. And I know like there are people who like I said have a hard line that like you shouldn't eat meat no matter what. I don't know if I feel that way. I think it would make a big difference to me if it was like a real farm and not a factory farm. I don't know. I like I said, I haven't landed somewhere firmly on that, but I think that would be amazing if we like
Yeah.
reduced meat enough to just have real farms, you know, like it be the main source again.
I also have like wanted to try to eat kosher at various times, and like none of my family have really kept kosher, so it never was like something I thought about growing up, but I I feel like the way that animals are slaughtered is like much more thoughtful, and the whole point of it is like being thoughtful with your food and especially meat consumption. And I like that as a practice, but it's also something I've struggled to actually
Yeah, and it
implement.
seems like one of the easiest ways to be vegan is to one of the easiest ways to keep kosher is to be vegan, actually. Like from people that I know, like from
Yeah,
Jewish vegans I
it
know
definitely
who have
is.
said like I don't even really have to think that hard about keeping kosher because I'm a vegan and so I'm not eating dairy and I'm
Right.
not eating meat. So like I there's a lot less to parse through.
Yeah.
Um but yeah.
Yeah. I already eat pretty limited dairy because I'm lactose intolerant, but I still have like I was persuaded by a dietitian to try to eat more dairy while taking lactose or lactate, but it makes it like twice as expensive every time I want to eat
Right.
any dairy, so I just don't. And even with lactate, I could never do milk. My body just wouldn't
Yeah.
let me,
That
but
makes sense.
I do feel differently about dairy. I think like it is like the small farm versus large farm thing though. Like the dairy farm that I went to, like all of the cows were like treated very well and they got lots of time to like play and not just be treated badly. Um and but they also like, I mean, one time I just like fell asleep in a field with a cow. Like I was like a kid and I was just like laying on the cow and the cow was snuggling with me. But I've also found like, I don't know, my aunt who's vegetarian has like given me all these ideas of supplements and things, and I think it might be that I need like the methylated or the not methylated version. I don't remember what it is, but like even when I've taken a lot of supplements when I've been vegetarian, I seem to get anemic unless I eat red meat like once a month or every couple months.
Yeah, well, we don't always process things the same way if we get them from supplements, unfortunately. I mean, I think this speaks to one of my favorite things about the horror genre. I think this movie makes me think about this in a way that I really like. It feels challenging, and it and I
Yeah.
like that this is like a topic that is being explored more, I think, in media now. Like I think we've gotten some kind of more movies that make you think about like the ethics of eating meat and is it really different, are animals really that different from people, is it, I think that this is like worth digging into.
And I think it's an issue, like the more that we have overpopulation, it's just so hard to feed people. And like we're thinking more and more about like how do we feed everyone. I realized from my notes after talking about this, especially when they pick up the hitchhiker at first, one of the people says, I think we just picked up Dracula. And I don't know like what makes them think that, but it is interesting, like thinking of the human consumption that happens later.
Yeah, which is kind of funny because I often don't think of vampires as cannibals, which they I guess are, so I don't know why I think we don't think about it that way.
Yeah. Even if they're not cannibals in the way that it's not exactly the same creature eating itself, it is still
Hmm.
something eating humans. But
Yeah, well, it's predation.
right, yeah. I also think it's interesting that so he tries to sell him the photo, and then after he doesn't want it, he like blows it up. He like takes out tinfoil and gunpowder and lights it, and then like wraps it up. And he's doing this like maniacal giggle. That actor was like so good at the creepy giggle. But I still at the time I
Hmm.
was like, this guy's a weirdo, but I didn't actually think he was super dangerous. He was like scary, but I was like I was pretty surprised when he comes back up later and they're like, I think it's like when they're trying to run away or something. I don't know what's happening. But oh, right. We see him later when everyone else has been killed. There's first we see Kirk getting killed when he goes into the house and he's not supposed to. Then Pam follows him. And then Jerry, like, by the time Jerry died, I was like, are you fucking serious, guys? Because he like also he's looking for his friend. So I guess like, and I guess there's like some noises. Like Leatherface is making like pig squealing noises at first, and then he's like doing like weird little giggles. And so I think he's like thinking maybe it's Pam, and I think he sees one of their sweatshirts like on the balcony. Um, so he goes in also, but it just seemed like such a bad choice, and especially I'm glad at least that they didn't have the keys, Sally and Franklin, because like Sally was like, Franklin was like, we should go into town and like get help. And Sally was like, no, we can't. We have to just go look for Jerry. And then they had like kind of been convinced to go into town, but then they didn't have the keys. And I think
Yeah.
it would have bothered me if they did have the keys and didn't go into town.
Yeah, it becomes a little more believable of a decision when they didn't have
Right.
the keys.
Yeah. And then they're just like, this is another thing that I'm like, wow, if they had cell phones, this would be so much easier. One for calling, but also for having a flashlight. Like, I just have a flashlight with me all of the time, and it's something that I take for granted now. Um,
Totally.
and like, also the fact that they're like going through the woods and she's pushing his wheelchair, it's so fucking hard to move a manual wheelchair over dirt, especially with like twigs and stuff.
Yeah, I remember my cousin and I took my grandmother to Pride in San Diego like several years ago, and this was before she had her knee replacement, and so we were pushing her in the wheelchair, and like when we were on the pavement it was like not easy but like fine, it was fine, but when we tried to go into any of like the music areas it was rough.
Yeah, it's hard. My strong muscular man pushes me. I I can't do it myself. But I hate being in a manual wheelchair because I have to rely on other people to move me most of the time. And actually at Pride, like 5 years ago, I was at Pride in my manual chair and I had the brakes on, but I still ended up getting pushed into the road. It's just like, I don't think they even had power chairs in the 70s. I'm not sure when they started happening, but it is like, it's a very different experience being in a manual chair versus a power chair.
Yeah, well, you have so much more autonomy if you're in a power chair, and they can
Yeah,
go over different terrain. I think like a little more easily.
for sure.
Um,
But I did still get stuck when I first got my power chair. I wasn't used to using it. I went to the zoo and I got stuck in like a little mulch ditch that like the ones where they have like trees and stuff like off the side of the I was trying to get out of the way and I was like, "Oh, I'm stuck now." But I still got out pretty easily. Um oh yeah, and so when he smears the blood on the van, Franklin says it looks like he was trying to write something. And one of the other guys says, Franklin, you're crazier than he was. Which that line just stuck out to me. It's like, okay. Um, and there's just like a lot of random, even like all the random little lines. I was like, this is, I just like, yeah, I just like this movie. They did a good job. Um, So they like go in the house, and it's like, I mean, it seems like nobody's been in this house in like 20 years. It's Sally and Franklin's grandparents' house that's down the road from Leatherface. But I mean, it definitely seems like his grandparents don't live there and haven't for a while. I guess they know that they went to the town because at least their grandpa, I don't know about the grandma, but the grandpa was buried in the cemetery where we hear in the first news story that there's been grave robberies. So they're like going to make sure it's okay. It's not totally clear to me like how far this town is from where they live, but it seems like it's far enough that they like don't want to drive back in the same day. But it seems like their plan was to go stay at that house that night, and there's no furniture. It's like really run down. Like a lot of the windows are broken. I wondered like if they had thought the house looked different than it did because they haven't been there in a while, or like what's going on with that. But I think that also like speaks to people going into the city and just like kind of abandoning and forgetting this rural life that maybe their family came from, which is interesting also because it's like this is around the same timeline when we were talking about the original Stepford Wives, where people were leaving the city, like white flight stuff.
Yeah.
But I think there is a big difference between rural areas and suburban areas were kind of birthed from more urban people wanting to be in like a semi-urban area.
Right, right. I think it went from like rural to urban to suburban.
Hmm. Oh yeah, and then so when Kirk and Pam are like going to the watering hole, they're kind of talking about how inaccessible the landscape is for Franklin, like how he could have gotten down there. Um, but Kirk says, we should just shoot him and put us out of our misery. And I had listened to that like three times because I like wasn't sure who he was talking about, but I think he was talking about Franklin, and that's like I don't know, that's just terrific. And he says it as like a really throwaway line.
Yeah, that's very aggressive.
And then like pretty soon after that, they never really find the watering hole. I guess they hear the generator and then they get distracted and go up there. Um, and then they all die like so fast. It was like the movie was moving along at like a fine pace, but was like nothing big had really happened yet. And then like all of a sudden they're all dead. And then it's nighttime. Franklin is actually the only one who ends up getting killed by a chainsaw, I think.
Yeah, not a lot of chainsawing happens pre-mortem, it seems like.
Yeah. And so then Sally runs away because she couldn't have done anything really. But I do feel really bad that Franklin says like there's something in front of me or like something like that, and then they just can't see it until it's too late.
Mhm.
And then Sally runs, and I was so impressed that she made it all the way back to the gas station. I was like, damn, she's a good runner. How did this happen? Um, and then she's not even safe there, and that hurt my heart.
Yeah.
But that guy is like the weirdest. For some reason, that guy bothers me the most, even though like he he seems to have like the most moral compass. Maybe not a moral compass, but like he seems to know that what he's doing is wrong. And like doesn't want to be involved in it to the same degree that his brothers are. Or I thought he was the dad at first, but I've heard that he's a brother. I don't know. It's kind of
The
unclear to
family
me.
tree is kind of like weird and not consistent. Yeah, no, and I think it's also just like it seems to me like he also just knows that he can pass for normal better than everybody else in the family can, and like somebody has to, because
Hmm.
somebody has to be like the public facing piece of the family.
I hate that like she was hyperventilating and saying call the cops and he's out there and stuff, and the guy was like, no, 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 everything is fine. Just like he seems like he's like genuinely trying to console her at first, and then he just like ties her up, and she grabs a knife and he like knocks it out of her hand with a broom, and then is just kind of like hitting her with the broom repeatedly and takes her into the van or a car or truck. And that's when they run into the hitchhiking guy again, and he says something like, I told you to stop that grave robbing, bringing it around to the beginning.
Yeah. What did you think about the dinner scene?
Well, so first when they were at the gas station, they're like showing the meat barbecuing, which they had eaten earlier. Um, and it wasn't clear to me, like, it didn't look obviously human or anything. It just looked weird. And then at the dinner scene, it was like much more obvious that they were eating human meat, I think. Um, and it was kind of surprising to me that they like sat her at the table even though she's like tied up and stuff. Like that part did make me think like these people just like want other human connection, and like they had been genuine with saying come to dinner, but they still like don't know how to actually. It's weird to me because like they're like humanizing her before killing
Right.
her.
Which is really an interesting choice. The dinner scene,
Yeah.
they spent, I don't know, there's a documentary about the making of this movie called, wait, what is it called? I had it pulled up.
Mm.
Um, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: A Family Portrait. And one of the things that they talk about in that and in
Mm.
like a lot of media that like discusses the making of this movie is that the dinner scene was filmed over like 25 hours, 26 hours, like over a whole day straight. And in the
Yeah.
heat, and like they're all wearing old ass clothes, dirty clothes, with all this like shit around.
Yeah, it was like over 100 degrees and they weren't allowed to change for like their, especially Leatherface was wearing the same shirt for
Right,
four
running
weeks.
around
That's
with
so
a
gross.
real chainsaw. So like lugging around this heavy ass thing, waving it around, like it just the smells and this like just the overwhelm and the grime of it all must have been a nightmare. Like truly just awful.
He almost died from using the real chainsaw too because it like flew out of his
Yeah.
hands.
Yeah. Kind of crazy. Kind of crazy to think that he was running around with a real chainsaw.
But the sound is so good.
Yeah. I have okay, so one of the questions that I had that I don't know my answer to for sure is like, do you think that this family explicitly wants to eat people, or do you think that it's like all the same to them? Like, do you think that it's just like, oh, whatever we have today is like what we're having? Or do you think they like want to eat people explicitly, like more than other meat?
I think it's all the same to them in terms of eating it, but I think that they do seem to take specific joy in killing people and like they have art made out of people. They have some art that's animal bones, but there's much more of it that's people and like the grave robbing speaks to a specific interest in human death to
Yeah, but the
me.
grave robbing seems like an anomaly that the rest of the family's like not down for.
I guess, but I kind of thought that some of their art that is bones and stuff was from that and not just like thing. I think it's just that one guy who's like stop grave robbing and it seemed more like you're gonna bring attention to us than like I don't like this
Mm,
morally.
that makes sense.
Because he was like the cops are like looking into this. Um and it was like on the like every time we heard the radio they were talking about the grave robbings and like how they were trying to find out who did it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
When they have the grandpa, they're like, Grandpa should kill her. He's great at killing. I was like, okay, so you guys are just like not really aware of what's happening here. They seem like they're like, oh, for old times' sake, but they like don't even have her tied up at that point. They seem that's is one of the scenes that makes me think like, okay, they just like really take joy in this, and they're like, it's like they want to give him this like nice thing and the thing that they think of is like killing her but she gets away because he's not physically capable of it anymore and they seem kind of unaware of that. They also like cut her finger in the beginning and he like suckles at the old man and that seems to like he like wasn't really moving before that and that like brings him back to life which kind of also made me connect to the thing where they say Dracula. What did you think of that scene, the family like the family dinner going into the trying to kill
Yeah,
her?
I think that you just like feel how uncomfortable that is. Like literally like the actual discomfort that the actors must have been feeling while they were filming it. But I think it's so good. It's just like so it's just like the perfect end to the movie somehow of like cuz they're like building it's like it's almost like miniature world building, right? Of just like what is with this family, right? Like it just gives you like another kind of like
Mm-hmm.
into window into whatever is going on. Um, so I really like it. But
Yeah.
I something else that I wanted to talk about from that scene is also just like Leatherface's like mom persona, like wife and mother persona, when he has his lady face on, and he is kind of the one who is
Mm-hmm.
like he seems to be taking.
And he's wearing an apron
He's
too,
wearing an
right?
apron. Yeah, he like is put into this role of seeming to be the one to like maintain everything in the house and like he's like the only quote unquote like woman in the family, which I just think is so interesting. And it's like interesting that he has his like different faces for different occasions and his different positions. Like he has his butcher face and then he has his like mom face.
Yeah, there's a third face too. I don't know when it comes up, but I know that I saw a picture of all three of them
Yeah, I
together.
just think that's so it's just interesting, and it's like interesting how the one has like the makeup on it and stuff, like it's like very explicitly
Yeah.
like a woman face.
It's hard for me to look at that by itself without thinking of things that I know from Leatherface, like the movie Leatherface. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think he had like a very tortured relationship with his own mom
Mm-hmm.
and is probably trying to recreate something there. But it is kind of like weird to me also that I guess that's just like maybe the only thing he knows, but that he's like, okay, now I'm doing the woman's work, gotta put on my woman
And
face.
like, who taught him to do that? You know what I mean? Like, was that something that like he came about on
Yeah.
his own, or was that something that was like instructed to him? How does he feel in his different faces? Like, I just have so many questions I would like to ask him if I could get an interview with Leatherface.
It was also really interesting seeing him like chasing her and she's like wearing cowboy boots. It was like I don't know, there was like a lot of country western elements, but I I think I guess there's the farm animal slaughter element I do kind of associate with cowboy boots, but I don't think of like I don't know, maybe it's part of like dissecting the fine southern gentleman thing. It's very Texas. I I don't think I found it that scary though. Like the scariest scene or the scariest like even though the other three died and Sally seems to have lived at the end, I think Sally had the scariest experience. And, like, I feel the worst for Sally, even though she seemingly made it out of there
Yeah,
alive.
I mean, you know me, I always feel worse for people who live than people who die. Like, I just think that speaks to like
Yeah.
my own mental state and like my own kind of like stuff. No, you know what I mean? Like that speaks to my own thing of like I would never want to live through something like that. Like make me the person who dies the fastest. But yeah, but
Right.
no, I would agree with that. But I think I feel very lucky because I did get to see this in a movie theater. And it is a whole other thing to see this movie in a movie theater because I think that this movie is not like scary in like the traditional sense. It is just an absolute onslaught of like stuff and like input and like gross stuff and loud stuff and just a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? And it was just so overwhelming in like the best way to see it in a movie theater. Like the sound is so good and like loud and like jarring and it's just yeah, if you ever get a chance to see it in a theater, go because it is it is definitely something to see.
Yeah, there seems to be, I think, probably actually some of Leatherface wanting to put on his female face. I think, especially in the dinner scene, is maybe trying to make her more comfortable, but it seems like there's very little love between these three people. Like they are working, and I guess the grandpa too, fourth, but all of these men, they seem like they're bound together in the way that they've like kind of agreed to help keep each other alive um, as family, but they don't feel like affectionate or I mean they're demeaning to each other a lot, except for that they all seem to kind of respect the grandpa.
Yeah, it seems definitely more about like family loyalty than family love.
Yeah. Yeah, well, during the scene where Sally first gets to the gas station and he's like tiring her up, I think like from so many other things I was seeing, I was just assuming that it was going to be sexual assaulty or like kind of sexually devious in an unpleasant way. And it wasn't at all. Um, I think that they are all kind of missing a mother figure, and it sort of seemed like they were just going to keep her when she was at the dinner. It wasn't like totally clear that they were going to try to kill her. And then I was surprised. I think anytime that it's daytime and uh, vile things are happening, it kind of surprises me, even though, like, of course, it could happen at any time of day. It reminds me of how I remember, like, my mom when I was a teenager, she would always be like, "You can hang out with boys however much you want during the day, but not once it's dark." And I was like, "Do you think that I can like only do bad things at night?" But it like, not that it's bad, but like things that she didn't want me to do. And I do kind of feel that way in horror movies where like it's like a major contrast from what I'm expecting anytime it's daytime, and it also like sort of adds this other sinister layer. And I think also like it does seem like Leatherface doesn't really know what he's doing is wrong. He's just been taught to do it, because I would think like most people, like if you're a serial killer and you're like chasing somebody, if like once the truck shows up or somebody, you would probably either like hide or try to act normal, and like he's just still chasing them with the chainsaw.
Yeah. Well, and I think going back to what you were saying about like the like daylight, like stuff happening in the daylight, I think that like it kind of makes everything so much more effective to me, because it's like there's no safety.
Right.
Like, right, you can't like seek the light and like feel safe from it, because you're just like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if it's 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon. Like, these people will kill you and eat your body. Like, you know what I mean? It just doesn't matter. Yeah. And I think that is like a scary thing to think about, because I think a lot of horror movies, it feels a bit like you just have to survive the night and then you can figure it out. And like, that's just not true.
Right. Yeah. And the actress who plays Sally said that she like wasn't even acting at the end, because she was just like so hot and so tired and was just relieved to be at the end when they're driving away. She was just like, yes.
I believe it. I believe it. I think this was probably absolutely like a grueling experience.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful that they had that grueling experience, because I just think this is a great movie. I really do. I just like, it's just like flawlessly executed, probably because they were mildly torturing all of the actors, which I don't love.
Yeah, I feel bad that most of the actors made very little money off of this, and yet like almost every horror fan I've talked to has said that this is one of their favorite movies.
Yeah.
I think I talked about this in the Feel the Fear episode, where like I saw whatever Texas Chainsaw franchise movie came out in like 2007, like whatever came out around there. I saw that one, but I was like not even watching most of it, but it was like terrifying, and it seemed, I don't know, I'd have to rewatch it, but it didn't seem like it had as much meat behind it. Wow, that's a funny word. That's a fun. I didn't mean it like that. Pun not intended.
But pun very much appreciated.
Yeah. It didn't have like as much substance, and was like, it was just like killing and chasing for the sake of those things, and like not as much symbolism.
Yeah, I think that's like is the challenge with like remaking or like adapting like or like replaying around with old movies and stuff, because you are like plucking it right from its context where it may have made sense, and like
right,
you need to know how to either tap back into that time period or make it fit with like the time period of the moment. And I feel like a lot of things are like, well, this movie was super effective, so let's remake it. It's like, well, it was super effective because it was like situated well.
Yeah. I do think like I'm probably going to watch Leatherface now, and like from what I watched, it seemed good, and like it seems like they blended it pretty seamlessly with what we know from the original film.
Yeah, I would watch that documentary also. I think you would find it interesting.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for listening to us talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre with a little sidetrack into vegetarianism. You can find us on Instagram at What Haunts You Pod, and we are totally open to hearing any thoughts that you guys had about this conversation or about this movie, or for any recommendations for what we should talk about next.
Thanks for listening. Bye.